Hello guys, and welcome back for another community featured build. Today we have a boss Magicka Warden build by Avandi. This is a light armor, sword and board, lightning staff Magicka Warden. It is very powerful. It is bulky, it's got mobility, it's got crazy healing power, it's got awesome damage, and insane sustain. This build is awesome at all forms of combat. It is a CP build, but you can definitely play it in the no CP campaigns as well. If you guys are interested in sending in your own builds to be featured on the channel, you guys can send it in to KristoferESO at hotmail.com. And another huge shout out to Avandi for sending this build in. Please check this man's ESO channel out, guys. He has got a YouTube channel. A link to that bad boy is down in the description if you want to see more gameplay from him, as well as other class gameplay too. He doesn't just play that Magicka Warden. And there you guys see that absolutely massive smack as all the yellows jump down off of that ledge there. So there you go, guys. Without further ado, let's jump into that build. Alright guys, so let's take a look at that build. So to begin, Avandi chose Argonian for his Warden build. And I think Argonian was his choice not only for the amount of resource return that Argonian gets when it drinks a potion, but on top of it, Argonian's also going to get some healing power, which is really beneficial for a Magicka Warden as well, which has really powerful heals on itself too. So Argonian is going to be pretty much the all-around sustain race, and that is why he has gone with Argonian for this build. You can go with other Magicka races if you like. Of course, if you feel like you need a little bit more sustain, you'll have to build that in elsewhere in the build. But let's take a look at that stat page. We have got a whopping, we're going to buff up here for the Magicka too. We have got a whopping 45.6k Magicka on our sword and board bar. We've got 27k hit points and 15k stamina. So Avandi has got a nice big bulk amount of stat on this build. A lot of every pool to work with, which is super great for a PvP build. We need the HP to be resistant to burst. We need that Magicka for, of course, damage and using our abilities, and then stam to break the stuns. And then when we buff up the health, we actually go up to 29k HP on this build. So a lot of hit points on this build too. Now taking a look at the sustain on this spec, 1700 Magicka recovery, and then we've got 810 stamina recovery. And this is pretty sweet. We are running tripods on this build, so when we buff up, you can see we've got 1900 Magicka and 938 stamina recovery. With the Argonian resource restore on potions, plus these base recoveries, this build has got a whopping amount of sustain. And then of course these bigger pools are also going to pair really well with the Argonian, getting a lot of resource back with those tripods when we use the potions. So taking a look at the spell damage and the spell critical on this build. Not the highest, but we have got a very large max Magicka pool. So a lot of the damage on this build is going to come out of that max Magicka pool, sitting at 30% spell crit on 2k spell damage on this build. So not a massive amount of spell damage. We are running the weapon spell damage enchant on the Master's Lightning stuff, so we do go up to about 2.4k plus spell damage. So pretty good damage, I think, all around. We are in light armor, so the penetration is going to push that even further. And then, of course, the 30% spell crit. This build is not running the spell crit buff. If you wanted to, you could fit it into the build somewhere, and that would add just a little bit more damage to this spec. Now, taking a look at the resistances on this build, we are going to buff up fully with all of our armor buffs, and we are actually running the Armor Master set on this build. So our physical spell resist on the sword and board bar coming in at just under 31k and 29k physical resist. Really nice. We have got a huge amount of bulk, and then on top of it, guys, we are running Bloodspawn too. So Avandi has over the hard cap for physical and spell resist on his build, which is super great for PvP because, of course, your opponents will have penetration, meaning that they will chew through your armor. So being over hard cap is totally fine for PvP. So yeah, a lot of resists on this build, and that, of course, is on our sword and board bar. The resists on this build go down quite a bit when we switch out to the lightning staff. You see we take quite a bit of a cut. And then the crit resist on this build is coming in at 3k critical resistance. Nice big bulky amount of crit resist. It's going to be very important for staying alive in PvP. Now, taking a look at the Mundus that this build's running, we've got the Atronach. And Avandi went for the Atro simply because of that Magicka recovery, putting that sustain on this build. This build is a vampire. It's going to help out not only with our Magicka stamina recovery, but on top of it, we are using vampirism skills on this build, i.e. mist form. So that is why you've got to be a vampire for this build. Now, the food that this build is using is the purple increase all primary stat food. And this is what you want to go for, I think, especially with Argonian. Having that bigger stat pool means that we'll be able to really take advantage of those that large resource return when we drink the potions. So this food is going to play into that just by bulking up all our stats. Of course, this is great to make us bulkier with our health and increase our damage with the Mag too. And then for the potion on this build, the tri-stat potions are the way to go, giving you health, magicka, and stamina back. And then, of course, if you wanted, you could potentially go for the spell crit magicka health potion here if you wanted to, just to kind of give you that buff that this build is missing there. All right, guys, so let's take a look at the gear that Avandi has chosen for this spec. So we're actually going to start with the Necropotent stat to begin, and this is going to be fantastic. It gives us magicka, 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 and then 3,150 magicka when we activate our pet. Really nice because we are running the Blue Betty, and that of course counts as the pet. The Blue Betty can also not be killed, so you get the full duration on it, which means that you can reliably keep up your Necropotence buff at all times on the Warden. Super nice, and this is going to be in our jewelry, our gloves, and our belt. Now, the next set that this build is running is the Armor Master set, and we talked a little bit about this before, and this is run on our Sword and Board bar. Now, Avandi went for the Armor Master set because this build is using the Light Armor Harness Magicka skill. So, what this essentially does is allows our Harness Magicka not only to give us a damage shield, but give us a huge armor buff on top of our already existing major armor buffs that we get from our Warden skills too. So a huge amount of armor coming out of this Sword and Board bar, and I actually really like this combination. And then of course Mist form is also going to be on this bar, meaning that you will have the most amount of bulk in your Mist form, which is super great. And of course, the Armor Master is also going to give us a little bit of a max health bonus, but we're really going, I think, for the armor bonus on this particular build. Now, taking a look at the lightning staff that we're running on the back bar, we've got the Master's Lightning Staff. This is going to reduce the cost of Destructive Touch by 30% and increase its damage by 2,000. Very important for this build because the Destructive Touch is our only stun on this spec. So it is not only your only stun, but it's actually kind of your primary spammable too. So the Master's Staff is actually very important for this build. If you don't have the Master's Staff, this is not viable at all to spam Destructive Touch like this. So you have to have the Master's Staff for this kind of a spec. And then finally, guys, the last set that we're running is the Bloodspawn set. And I saved this one for last because Avandi said you have a few options here. So the first option he said is Bloodspawn, the stamina recovery. You generate ultimate when hit, and then of course you can gain the physical spell resistance. This is what allows this build to push over hard cap physical spell resist, is running Bloodspawn. Now, alternatively, you could switch this out for something like the Pirate Skeleton, which is also going to give you some bulk physical spell resist, and then it's also going to give you the major protection as well, which is really, really nice. It's a really good set too. It pairs really well with this build because we have quite a bit of mixed bulk. However, you don't have to go with Pirate Skeleton if procs are not your fancy. Avandi also said that he likes to run a single Dama House with the Pirate Skeleton as well. So this is going to give him the magicka and the stamina as well as the physical spell resist for his build. So more max stat pools and more bulk too. So it's kind of your options that you want to run on this build. Kind of up to the user. These are the options that Avandi gave me, and he said these are his favorite to use. So taking a look at the traits, guys, we have got full impenetrable on the gear, and I think this is very important because this is a heavy mist form. We've got Sword and Board for blocking as well, and we've got quite a bit of physical spell resist on this build, so having that impen is going to be the all-around best bet to reduce the incoming damage that a build like this takes. So that is the way to go. Taking a look at the enchants on the gear, we've got full maximum magicka, and this is important yet again because we stack max mag on this build. And then taking a look at the jewelry that we're running, we have got Necropotence in Arcane with 2 times Magicka Recovery enchants, and then 1 spell damage enchant. So if you pick a race that doesn't get the same amount of sustain that something like Argonian does, this is where you can drop a little bit of perhaps spell damage and get that sustain that the Argonian has to kind of make up for it. Otherwise, this is the way that you want to go. And then taking a look at the traits on the weapons, guys. For the Lightning Staff, we have got the weapon spell damage enchant on the Nirnhone Staff. So the Nirnhone Staff, of course, for the most amount of burst possible on that Lightning Staff bar. And then the weapon spell damage enchant is nice because it's going to give us a little bit of additional burst and healing whenever this goes off. And then on the Sword and Board bar, Avandi went with defending to increase the physical spell resist, and then sturdy with a maximum Magicka enchant for the shield. And then for the poisons on this build, guys, Avandi has gone with the Drain Magicka poisons. And this is just going to help out with a little bit of resource restore, as well as making it harder for your opponent to have the sustain that they want to. All right, guys, so let's take a look at the abilities that he's running on this build. So we're going to start off on the Lightning Staff bar, and this is Avandi's offensive bar. The first ability we have is Shimmering Shield. This is going to be great for ultimate generation. This is major heroism plus the Blood Spawn. This build can generate ultimate like crazy. So we're going to be able to spend a lot of time in our Northern Storm on this build. And this is really going to help with that. On top of it, Shimmering Shield is going to absorb a huge amount of damage from incoming projectiles, so it gives this build a very strong counter to getting pelted on from ranged opponents. The next ability we have is Shock Touch. And this is, of course, here for that stun. It is the primary spammable of this build because we're running the Master's Staff. Without the Master's Staff, this would not be as effective as it is on this build. The big thing, of course, is that cost reduction and the damage increase that it gives. It really makes this a fantastic ability to use with the staff, but not a very good ability for a spammable outside of it. So because we have the staff, this is a great spammable, and if we compare the damage on it actually to something like our Force Pulse, you can see the damage on Force Pulse is coming in at 7,500 here, and if we take the bigger damage morph of Force Pulse, you can see it's still just under 8k. So Shock Touch is going to deal the same amount of damage as our Force Pulse, but add the dot as well and stun. So the Master Staff working overtime there. Now the next ability we have is Deep Fissure, and this is going to be that big AoE smack. You guys have seen it on the Warden so many times. Avandi using this skill for that major breach, that big AoE damage comboing with his ultimate and his Shock Touch as well. So a really great delayed combination attack for the Warden, and a really great ability to put pressure on a group of players. The major breach that it applies is really nice too, because it will increase all your outgoing damage after applying that major breach. The next skill we have is Bird of Prey. Now this is primarily here for that minor berserk slot to increase the amount of damage that we do on this bar. Of course, it is an animal companion skill, further increasing the flat damage that we deal on this bar as well. And then finally, guys, we can get major endurance, and we can get the movement speed buff from here. So I had mentioned earlier that if you wanted to run the spell crit bonus on this build, you can. This will cover your major endurance buff if you choose to get the spell crit bonus through your potion, and that would be nice there. But outside of that, for the most part, guys, you won't use this for the major endurance because we have Mist Form for that as well. This is mostly there to give you that burst on this front bar. And then Avandi has gone with Gripping Shards as his last offensive normal ability here. And Gripping Shards is actually a very interesting choice for the morph here, because this is the morph that increases your damage based on the amount of health that you have instead of your max Magicka pool. So the amount of damage that this ability does is actually fairly low for this build, but the reason that Avandi went for it is because it's that on-cast AoE Immobilize. This has got 6 meters of radius, and it will immobilize everything around you on cast. And it's undodgeable. A really, really fantastic ability, to be perfectly honest, just for the utility that it provides. And then, of course, it will be a Frost Dot as well, allowing Avandi to put a little bit more pressure with it too. But I really like this ability because of the way that you see Avandi use it in his gameplay. He is very smart with his Immobilize, and you see him catch even groups of players off guard with this Immobilize and absolutely destroy them because of it. So I really like his choice of using this skill here as well. And then finally, guys, for the ultimate, Avandi has gone with Northern Storm. And this is great. It's going to be a great amount of base frost damage every 1 second. It's going to last 8 seconds. While we are hitting our opponents, they will be snared by 70%, which is a super brutal snare. While we're in our ultimate, we gain major protection as well as any allies in the ultimate, and while this ability is slotted, we get an 8% max Magicka increase. Very important for that passive slot because we are running a set like Necropotence, and this build stacks the max Magicka so high. So Northern Storm is going to be really great for that max Magicka stacking. And yeah, this is the ultimate that you use on this build. It's actually on both bars. Avandi went for this ultimate to stay in that blizzard. And I agree. I think this is by far the best ultimate that Warden has for World PvP. Such a fantastic ability. All right, guys, so let's take a look at the Sword and Board bar. So Avandi's Sword and Board bar is a shield / support bar, and I actually really like how he set this bar up because it makes it very, very bulky. So taking a look at the first ability that he uses, Blue Betty. This is going to be a great amount of Magicka Restore over 27 seconds, and it's going to be access to major sorcery for this build, giving us that offensive buff that we're looking for. And then when we activate the Netch, it will remove 1 negative effect. Really nice. This is a completely free ability, and it removes 1 negative effect, so you can essentially spam it to cleanse yourself when you need to remove a lot of dots on you, and you have the opportunity to do so. If you have a lot of negative effects on you, this is not really the ability to go to. It's more just there for that sustain buff at that point, and you want to use your heals instead. Now, the next ability Avandi has gone for is Ice Fortress. Bread and butter Warden buff here. Got to have that physical spell resistance. Got to have that minor protection. 24-second duration on this bad boy. Really, really nice defensive buff all around. Now, the next ability that we have is Elusive Mist, and this is going to be the primary kind of mobility for this build. Not only will it be major expedition for this spec, on top of it, it will give you complete immunity to snare and immobilize and reduce the damage that you take by 75%. Avandi has slotted this bad boy on his Sword and Board bar, so you get as much bulk as possible in your Mist form on this build, which is really, really awesome. And then finally, while you're in your Mist, you do not regenerate Magicka, and that's totally fine. We've got a lot of sources of Magicka regen on this build outside of Mist form, and then of course Argonian getting a huge chunk of resource back when they use their potion. Really great for Mist form as well. And then the next ability we have is Harness Magicka, and this is a very important ability for this build for a few reasons. Number one, it is a damage shield. We've got a 7k damage shield on the Harness Magicka. Not a massive amount of shield, but when we take damage on it, we will restore Magicka, so it makes this ability very, very cheap to cast, assuming our opponent can't tear through the shield really, really fast. And then number two, when we use our Harness Magicka on this build, we have got the Armor Master set on, and it is going to give us a huge bonus to our physical and spell resistance. So not only do we get the damage shield here, but we get that physical spell resistance bonus that stacks on top of the Ice Fortress bonus. So a huge amount of defensive buff coming out of this ability here. I really, really like this. Now, he did pick the Harness Magicka morph, and this is going to be the smaller shield that is a little bit more cost-effective to you. It is up to the user here which morph you want to go with. This build has so much just straight up bulk, I don't think you need the super huge shield. I think this is a great way to go for long-term sustained fighting especially. And then finally, the primary heal that Avandi uses, actually the only heal that Avandi uses on this build, is Living Trellis. And you guys know Living Trellis, such a fantastic ability if you've ever played Magicka Warden. We get a base 2,500 health every time we take damage per second. Huge amount of incoming heal per second when we're taking damage, so it makes us very, very bulky. And then when the vines expire, they heal an additional 6k health. So you can just essentially spam this ability to get that 6k heal, plus the bonus healing ticks for whenever you take incoming damage. Super great Warden heal. And then finally, this also gives us access to major mending. So the amount that this ability heals, just increase it by 25% when our health starts to drop. Really, really great heal for the Warden. And then the ultimate, yet again, is Northern Storm. And Avandi has gone for the double bar Northern Storm on this build. And I think the big reason why he chose to do it is not because just Northern Storm is a really great ability, but that 8% max Magicka bonus is good for both his bars. On his back bar here, it will affect the size of his damage shield, and then on the front bar, it affects the amount of damage that we deal. So I like the choice of Northern Storm on both bars for that reason. All right, guys. So let's take a look at the champion points on this build. Starting off in the tower tree, Avandi has gone for 72 in Warlord, nothing in Sprinter, and nothing in Bashing Focus. I actually kind of like his focus on a lot of Warlord for this build. Getting stunned is pretty much what he's going to have to deal with the most with his stamina bar. We do have the block on the stamina bar too, but when you watch Avandi play, he uses Mist Form a lot more than anything else while he's on his Sword and Board bar. So the Warlord, I think, is the best option because of that style of play. Then taking a look at the tower tree, guys, Avandi has gone with 75 in Arcanist. Huge amount of Magicka recovery. Really great for this build. Magicka recovery is the only focused recovery on this spec, so that is why he's put so many points in here. And then in the shadow tree, Avandi's got 72 Shadow Ward and 51 in Tumbling. Big focus on blocking here, and then a follow-up with a focus on tumbling. So I think the reason he chose to put so many points into just reducing the cost of block and dodge roll instead of actually investing a lot into Mooncalf was because we don't have a huge base stamina recovery to begin with, and this build gets a huge amount of resource return just from using the potions as well. So I like this choice by Avandi to focus on just like cost reduction essentially in his champion points here. Really good call on his part, I think. All right, so taking a look at the blue tree, we've got 59 Spell Erosion, 56 Elemental Expert, 37 Elfborn, and 37 Blessed. So a big focus on just flat increase in damage on this build. Flat increase of our elemental damage and flat increase of our spell penetration. This build is rocking over 13k spell penetration, so a lot of penetration on this build to cut through opponents' armor. Really, really nice. Not a huge focus on Elfborn here because, of course, Avandi has that lower 30% crit rate. If you run the critical buff, you'll get a little bit more out of this passive too. And then finally, a little bit in Blessed too to focus on that healing power for Vines. And then taking a look at the Atronach tree, we've got 81 in Master at Arms, and this is just to increase the amount of direct damage that we deal. Nothing else was invested into on this for Avandi here. He didn't want the Tactician passive. He doesn't do a ton of roll dodging in his gameplay, so I don't think the Tactician is really the way to go for this build either. And then we've got nothing in the Ritual as we are running a Magicka-based spec. Now, taking a look at the Steed tree, we've got 72 in Ironclad and 49 in Resistant. Focus on decreasing incoming direct damage, very important for PvP as a lot of burst is direct damage. And then finally, the critical resistance is really important for PvP yet again, especially the champion campaign, because people have a lot of crits, and crits are going to deal a lot of damage. So reducing that is very nice. And then taking a look at the Lady Tree, we've got 49 Hardy, 49 Elemental, and 51 Thick Skin. Very even split in these trees here between decreasing incoming physical, magical, and damage over time. So I like that choice there too. And then we've got nothing in the Lord tree. So just a quick tip about this tree here. I feel like Avandi could actually benefit from maybe taking a few points out of Ironclad and maybe a few points out of these trees here and investing into Spell Shield as well as the Light Armor Focus. I think he'd get a little bit more mixed bulk out of that, but that's just my personal opinion. There is the champion points, guys, and that is the build. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into that PvP commentary. So here we go, starting off with a nice big smack on the yellow player there, going into his ultimate and putting a lot of pressure on all the yellows at the door there as his friendly player jumps on and helps there too. And they just quickly clean everybody up. A nice smack there to start off the beginning of this fight. And as you can see, we've got some more yellow coming to try to take this keep. So Avandi goes for the stun into his Deep Fissure, and there we see he kills the first player, the same combo, stun into Deep Fissure. And Avandi actually keeps going into the back line here. I think he just wants to keep putting pressure on some of these ranged players. There you see a massive amount of damage. The Deep Fissure Lightning Staff stun absolutely hitting this guy for so much damage. Again, oh my god, good dodge roll from that player there, but it is not enough, and Avandi brings him down. Taking a little bit of pressure, he just resets his defensive buffs, goes for the Deep Fissure into that Lightning Staff stun with the light attack. His friendly player comes in, the Sork, delivering a big smack as well, and they bring that guy there. And there we see, I think Avandi gets the kill on that guy with his Deep Fissure as he's running around the corner. I think we saw the AP tick for that there. And now they are kind of trapped behind this wooden rampart with a lot of yellow on the other side. Avandi's going to set his Deep Fissure here, go into his Northern Storm, so he's got a lot of damage coming out, gets a great smack with the Deep Fissure, goes for the Lightning Staff stun, brings the player down. His friendly Sork brings down the other player in his ultimate there as well, and now they're just going to retreat back behind these wooden ramparts yet again. Avandi's going to reset his buffs, reset his vines, and then hit these guys with another Deep Fissure Lightning Staff combo coming around the corner. This guy's going for the res. Oh my god, a massive smack. I think the Stamsork went for his Dawnbreaker there too, and they just absolutely clean up this yellow group. There's the next stun there. Wow, nicely played. All right, guys, so that first little clip, we got to see a bit of the firepower and the bulk of this build. And in this clip here, Avandi's playing alone, and we get to see some of that movement and the bulk of this build as well. So he's coming around the corner into a bunch of blues, going into his Northern Storm, but right away they turn on him with a lot of damage. Avandi responds well with his block into some Leeching Vines, and then using the Mist Form to get out of there. And then what he's going to do is just kind of kite around the staircase here to just kind of break a bit of distance from this blue group. And as you guys can see, they're putting a lot of pressure on him. Avandi is using that Mist Form, of course, to soak up the incoming damage and to stay mobile. And just putting the hardest Magicka, the Vines, and the Mist Form. And honestly, with this combination of skills, just look at his Magicka pool as he mists around. He can pretty much do this forever as long as he wants, and until they drain his stamina bar, they're never going to finish him off. And as you guys see there, the Argonian passive, as soon as he used that potion, his stamina bar goes right back up to 15k. So Avandi decides that he is going to retreat out of the keep for this one, but as he's retreating here, you see him taking a huge amount of damage from the opposing players, doing a really great job going for the Vines and the shield, weaving between the two. Such a great combination of healing abilities to use a shield with the Vines, because the Vines will heal you as the shield gets broken too. There you see Avandi tries to turn with his Northern Storm ultimate. However, he's taking a lot of pressure from these guys, and he decides to continue to retreat along the side of the hills here. So Avandi is able to move pretty much completely unhindered. I mean, just look at his resource pool and his health bar. He's not really stressing his bars in order to stay mobile like this, and I really like that because mobility is such an important part of PvP. And here we go. Avandi gets the split on the group, catches the lower level player here. Huge combo to bring him down, and now he's got a single, what looks like a sorcerer on him here, and he's just going to continue to exchange blows with his sorcerer, refreshing his Deep Fissure in between his defensive buffs. Here comes the enemy meteor. Avandi with a great block on the meteor into his lightning staff combo. Huge stun there with his Deep Fissure, goes into the Northern Storm, nearly taking the Sork down with that first combo there. And here we see the Sork tries to streak away. The Deep Fissure comes in from behind, and down he goes. All right, guys, so for the last clip that we have here today, we've got a bit of a group fight with Avandi here, and this build is actually really awesome in all forms of combat, but I think it is especially good at group fighting because of the kit and the abilities that it has. And as you guys can see here, a lot of blue are hitting the top of this mountain, and Avandi and his friends are trying their best to hold, but just more and more blue are hitting the top of the hill, and they are forced off the top of the hill here. So here we get to see something really interesting from this build. We get to see Avandi kind of play an off healer for his friendly players. He's throwing a lot of vines on the friendly players here, and I guarantee that at least one or two of those players didn't die because Avandi was healing them. I really like Magicka Warden and the Vine combo because it is so good, not only for healing yourself, but healing friendlies. So there you go. Now, as you guys can see, the remainder of this group has been pushed back behind this rock. Avandi goes for his ultimate and then into the gripping shards. A huge immobilize on the group there, and just look at those AP ticks come down. They get a lot of kills on that corner there, and I have to attribute that to the immobilize off the gripping shards. To be perfectly honest, that immobilize caught the entire group off guard on that little stack there, and they took a huge smack from this group of players. And now it is just Avandi and one other player as the blue continue to bring their fury. They catch this blue guy by himself, get a nice combo into him. He goes for the stealth, and he ends up getting pulled out of stealth by the Deep Fissure. So Avandi quickly finishes him off with the friendly player there. Another blue comes off the end, end, we just go for a heavy attack channel, and oh my god, here comes the big blue group. Avandi going into his block, getting the vines off, getting the mist off. There we see he manages to get away back to a friendly camp here, so he's going to have his friendly players coming to help him out, so he decides to turn and reverse back onto these blue players here. Gets a nice stun off on this guy here, opening with the deep fissure yet again, but we've got a lot of blues in the field, so Avandi's just going to try to soak up a bit of fire with his block there, making sure to refresh his vines as well. So much bulk on this build into that burst damage. I really like it. And as you guys can see, they are planning to set yet another smack on this group of blues. They've got them kind of piled up on this tight little spot. Avandi goes into his ultimate here. The deep fissure coming down. His friendly players dropping the ultimates as well. Massive amount of damage, bringing down a bunch of blue players right in the middle of the stack there. And the rest of these blue players respond really well, going into their defensive abilities and heals. But after that smack, man, they just cannot come back from it. Avandi and his group are just going to tear into these guys, making sure to take them down. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the end of the footage, and this is the end of the build video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this build. If you did, hit that like button. If you guys are new here, hit that subscribe button. If you guys didn't catch me earlier, check out Avandi's ESO channel on YouTube. A link to his YouTube channel, of course, is in the description below. If you guys want to send in your own build to be featured on the channel, or you guys want to send in clips for top 5 PvP battles, you guys can send them to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. We stream live on Twitch, so if you guys want to come chat with me on Twitch or come and watch some gameplay, you can check out my Twitch. A link to that is in the description below as well. And then finally, guys, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers. They give me better ping to ESO, and they are free to try. No credit card or anything to sign up. So if you guys want to give them a shot, no harm, no foul. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in today. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys again next time. Have a great night.